So today we're going to be talking about matter, mass, and weight. So this is officially the start of our properties of matter unit. And in properties of matter, we talk about what matter is, how we can measure it, how we can figure out how packed matter is. So that leads us to the first question of, well, what really is matter? And matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Okay, so it has to be something that exists in the world, and it has mass, right? Meaning that this is something we typically think of as weight. We'll talk about what weight actually is in a little bit. So it has mass, and it takes up space, right? It has to exist three-dimensionally and take up space. So another way of describing it is it's basically the stuff that makes up everything, right? You are made up of matter, your pencil is made up of matter, your Chromebook is made up of matter, your dog is made up of matter, the walls of your bedroom are made up of matter, right? Matter is the stuff that everything is made of. Now, matter itself is made up of atoms. So atoms is something that you'll talk about more in 7th and 8th grade. But this over here is a picture of an atom. You can see at the middle is the nucleus. It's made up of protons and neutrons. You can see that there are electrons that kind of circle and orbit around it. So this is an atom. Atoms make up matter. Matter makes up everything. Okay. There are different states or phases of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and the less talked about plasma. So these you've definitely talked about before, right? Solid would be like ice cubes, liquid in your glass, and then gas would be like water vapor, or clouds, right? And then plasma is something that we'll talk about more later in our unit. And it's basically when you electrically charge a gas. You put like an electric current through it, and it happens at a pretty high temperature. So this is matter, right? Takes up space and has mass, basically is the stuff that makes up everything. Now, this leads us into the discussion of mass versus weight. Oftentimes we use those words interchangeably, even though they mean different things. So mass is actually a measure of how much matter is in an object, how much stuff is in that object, okay? Units that we generally use when we are talking about mass are different versions of grams. So you could have kilograms if it's a large amount of matter. You might have milligrams if it's a small amount, or just regular grams. Most of the electronic balances or scales that we'll use in here measure in grams. So the tools that you would use to find the mass of something would be a scale like we have over here, or an electronic balance. And so you would put the object on there. It would give you a number, right, in grams, and that would tell you essentially how much matter, how much stuff is making up that object. Now, mass is constant no matter your location, okay? That's important, right? Mass stays the same no matter what. The reason that that is important is because it is not true for weight, okay? So when we talk about weight, we usually kind of use it interchangeably with the word mass, even though it's actually a totally different thing. So weight is actually a measure of the force of gravity on an object, okay? So it's basically telling you how much gravity is affecting that object, kind of pulling on it. The units for this is newtons, which is a capital N. And to measure this, you would use a spring scale, which is over here, has that hook that you kind of hang the object off of, and it goes down and tells you how much it weighs, or some type of scale like you might see at your doctor's office, okay? Now, the thing about weight is that weight changes based on your location. So you actually weigh slightly less at the equator than you do at the North Pole, right? Because there is slightly less gravity pulling on you at the equator versus the poles. If you were then to, take a rocket ship to the moon, you would weigh even less on the moon, right? Because it is a matter of how much gravity is pulling on you, and there is less gravity on the moon than there is on Earth. So weight is going to change based off of different locations on Earth, based off of different locations around our solar system or universe. Whereas mass, how much stuff makes you up or makes a remote control up or makes a shoe up, right, is going to remain the same. So if we look at the difference, right, mass is essentially how many atoms are coming together to make up you, right? Whereas weight is how much the force of gravity is kind of pulling on you at any given place. Mass is constant, whereas weight changes. So if weight changes, we have to know how we can calculate weight. And it's actually a formula that we use. Weight equals mass times gravitational field. Okay, so you multiply the mass of something times the force of gravity that is acting on it in that location, and you'll find the weight. So we're going to do a practice problem of this, a couple of practice problems with our next part of our lesson, where you're actually going to be finding the mass of an object or a person or a friend or your pet. And then we're going to be figuring out how that weight of that object or person or pet is going to actually change based off of the changing locations that we put them in. So this is an introduction, right, to matter, mass, and weight. We know that matter is basically the stuff that makes up everything. Mass is a measure of how much matter is in something, how much stuff makes it up. And then weight is actually a measure of how much gravity is acting on an object.